Hi everyone, and welcome to the Never-Ending Story, the Cultural Evolution of Narratives, Part 8. In this lecture we'll be talking about perhaps a more recent form of storytelling, the conspiracy theory, and what part our psychology might play in the appeal of these kinds of tales. This lecture is by me, Joe Stubbersfield. Conspiracy theory. So to begin with, we've got to think about what do we mean by conspiracy theories. And actually, the definition of conspiracy theory can be quite tricky and is complicated by the fact that genuine conspiracies do occur. However, we could consider conspiracy theories to be a belief that either a group of individuals or an organization is deliberately and secretly performing illegal or harmful acts or covering up illegal or harmful acts. Bob Blazevich, a professor of critical thinking in the USA, provides a nice definition here. He says that claims of conspiracy that rely on already disproved claims or fail to produce compelling evidence but nonetheless persist, these become conspiracy theories. From a cultural evolution perspective, it's this persistence of the theories despite their lack of evidence that is really of interest to us. Conspiracy theories can cover all aspects of culture and society. They can be about the banking system, your government, healthcare system, the royal family. In this way, they can explain the world around us. But they can also have very serious consequences. Misbeliefs surrounding the origins, causes, and treatment of HIV/AIDS, such as AIDS being created by the CIA or that the treatment is cover for medical experimentation, are associated with non-adherence to medication and reduced use of contraception. These kinds of beliefs are thought to have contributed to over 300,000 unnecessary deaths in South Africa in the 1990s. Conspiracy theories are also thought to play a role in radicalization and extremism. They can cover both the far right and far left, and also thought to inspire terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda and other radical Islamist groups. They often play a central role to their ideology and propaganda, and are thought to be a radicalizing multiplier, which feeds back into ideologies and internal dynamics of these extremist groups. But another thing that's interesting about conspiracy theories is that they play a key role in some fiction. So they have an appeal to people who don't necessarily believe in them in the form of fictional media, such as films, TV series, and video games. But what is it about conspiracy theories that appeals to us, and why do people believe in them? And if they don't believe in them, why do people find conspiracy theories entertaining? So one possible explanation is something called the Hyperactive Agent Detection Device, or HAD. This is an evolved predisposition to perceive intentional agency when there is none. This is thought to have evolved because false negatives are much less costly than false positives. So if you imagine hearing a rustle in the bushes, if you imagine it to be a bear and flee, but it proves just to be the wind, you haven't really lost anything. Whereas if you hear this rustle in the bushes and you imagine it to be the wind, but actually it is a bear, then you've lost your life. In this case, having a hyperactive agent detection device, seeing agency where there might be none, is adaptive for survival, because false negatives are always much less costly than false positives. However, this agent detection device can leap to a larger and contemporary scale, and mean that we see intentional agents behind natural disasters, diseases, and accidents. Because of this hyperactive agency detection, life is not just random or accidental, but determined by intentional agents. Conspiracy theory belief is predicted by a tendency to attribute agency where it is unlikely to exist. So it seems like this hyperactive agent detection device plays a role in conspiracy theory belief. And it's easy to see that when a tragic accident occurs, people are often quite quick to attribute agency to that accident. However, this isn't the full picture. It explains seeing agency behind events, but it doesn't explain who those agents might be, and doesn't explain the full extent of conspiracy theory belief. Something which might explain how people decide upon the likely agents behind a conspiracy theory is in-group favoritism and out-group negativity. A key factor of the fact that as humans we live in groups is that not everyone can be in your group. In-group favoritism, preferring your in-group, and out-group negativity, having negative feelings about your out-group, is a robust finding in the psychology literature, and is thought to play a key role in prejudice and discrimination. Outgroups are also considered to be more stereotypical and more homogeneous, and so it's likely that in stories that feature stereotypes, a content bias for stereotype consistency may be playing a role in their psychological appeal. As I was saying, in-group favoritism and out-group negativity is thought to play a key role in the development of prejudice. And we know from studies that children from age of 5 prefer their in-group to an out-group, even if that group identity is minimal and arbitrary. In experiments, it's able to get people to have in-group favoritism and out-group negativity, even if that group identity is just defined by something as simple as shirt color or scarf color. This study by Harriet Over and colleagues investigated if children seek out information that supports and extends their initial intergroup biases. So in this experiment, children were divided into arbitrary groups through coloured scarves, green and yellow. And they were presented with different storybooks to see and asked which kind of stories they would prefer to hear. So these stories were positive about their in-group and negative about their out-group, or negative about their in-group and positive about their out-group. So you can see the picture here shows some of the kind of stories that they were presented with. So it might show their in-group being nice and giving a cookie to another child, and an out-group being nasty and pushing a child over, and vice versa. So they're asked which story would they like to hear. Now it might be intuitive that they would want to hear the positive story, but bear in mind that it's probably important to know if children in your outgroup and are nasty and likely to push you over. Study 1 showed that they had a preference for the positive in-group story, and study 2 showed that they had a preference for stories which showed their in-group to be positive and the out-group to be negative. So they were consistently preferring these stories that had demonstrated their in-group to be nice and positive. What's interesting is this also had an influence on their group preference. So you can see in this figure the initial ratings are in black and the post-experiment ratings are in grey. In their initial rating, they did have a more positive rating for their in-group, but the rating for the out-group is still above the middle level of the scale for preference. Following the experiment, following choosing these stories which had a positive in-group message and a negative out-group message, we can see that their Rating of their in-group went up a bit. However, it had a particularly strong effect on their rating of the out-group, which went down from above the medium level to well below it. So we can see this influence on the media that they selected based upon their in-group and out-group favoritism actually strengthened that in-group and out-group favoritism. Now, of course, this experiment afterwards they were fully kind of debriefed and made sure that they no longer felt strong feelings about people wearing particular coloured scarves. And it's interesting, of course, how easy it is to develop these kind of in-group and out-group preferences based on something so arbitrary. A classic experiment in psychology looking at how prejudice might influence the transmission of information is Allport and Postman from 1947. In this experiment, participants were first shown this picture, which shows a white man aggressively threatening a black man with a switchblade. The first set of participants were asked to describe this picture to another set of participants in a transmission chain study. And then the second lot of participants had to remember this description and pass it on to further participants, and so on down the chain. In this case, transmission chains were separated by race, with black participants in some chains and white participants in others. Now bear in mind that in 1947 in America, they still had almost another decade of segregation in schools, which were segregated until 1954. And generally segregation continued for almost another 20 years after 1947. So it would be fair to describe this as a racist society. So what happened is that information was passed along the chains. In the chains of white participants, as the information went along the chain, starting off with initially a description of this picture, the roles swapped. The black man became the aggressor in the situation, and the white man became the victim of that aggression. Whereas in the chains consisting of black participants, the roles remained the same, showing how existing prejudice can influence how information is passed from one person to another. This combination of biases can create a powerful effect, combining negativity or threat bias, which we discussed in the horror lecture, with in-group, out-group biases that are a particularly robust finding in psychology, creates a very powerful story. In terms of conspiracy theories, while we might think of them as a relatively contemporary issue, they've actually been with us for a very long time. Conspiracy theories surrounding the ritual murder of children go back almost 2,000 years, and they used to demonize outgroups since that time. While they were initially attributed by the ancient Romans to Christians, they became particularly known to be associated with Jewish people, particularly in medieval Europe. So this is the idea that individuals of an outgroup would kidnap the children of an in-group for use in their rituals. So this was applied to Jewish people in medieval Europe. It was also applied to individuals accused of witchcraft in the 16th and 17th century. There are stories about hippies doing it in the 1960s, and it's also reflected in the satanic panic of the 1980s, where individuals were accused of abusing children in satanic rituals. Another example of how threat bias and outgroup bias might be combined is seen through international outgroup conspiracies. So these can be seen as stories about an alliance between a minority outgroup within a country and some kind of international organization, perhaps a banking system or something like that. These are perhaps famously displayed in the International Jewish Conspiracy, where Jewish individuals within a society were thought to be part of a wider conspiracy linked to the banking system or Masons or some other international organization. So to conclude, conspiracy theories have a strong appeal both in terms of belief and in our fiction, and they have potential serious consequences. It seems like they involve Psychological mechanisms like the hyperactive agency detection device, which means we are prone to seeing agency behind events where no such agency may occur. They also exploit our biases to prefer our in-group and have negative feelings about an out-group, and that is likely to influence the identity of the agents that are thought to be behind the conspiracy theories. And this combination of different biases makes conspiracy theories highly appealing and highly culturally successful, and also very influential.